Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this Thursday afternoon. I always have to check what day of the week it is. It's a bit scary, really. Hopefully, you're not getting as much interference and delay as the other day. I'm afraid I wasn't going to stream today. I have put my neck out, so I'm a little bit stiff. And I put this jumper on this morning and I cannot take it off now because I cannot move my head. So you just have to take me hoodie and all. I hope that you're all very well. Hello to John and Robert and Richard and Peter and David and John and Terry and Marco. Just snuck in there. Today's topic is going to be on the subject of natural lighting, and I've got a few tips and hints and experiments. Hello, Nick. And things that I want to hopefully help you with. Nikon recently, I think actually at the beginning of the month, and I kind of missed the boat on it a bit, but they started this campaign, which I talked about the other day, called #CreateYourLight. And the idea was that people could do creative projects from within the confines of their homes to kind of play on that theme a little bit. And they were talking about front lighting and side lighting and all that kind of stuff. Well, I thought we'd talk a bit about that. There was also a Nikon Owner magazine that came out last year, possibly the year before. Yes, I do need an osteopath. Unfortunately, I can't seem to get hold of one right now. My osteopath is in London and I'm in Sussex, so I need to find someone a bit closer to me, but thanks, Randall. I really do. It's actually awful. I can't move most of my right side of my head today. So if this is a slightly stiff and robotic looking stream, I apologize. I am going to just keep my head in one position as much as I possibly can. Otherwise I will be in agony and that won't be a fun stream to watch at all. So I'm going to talk about that. There was a Nikon Owner magazine that came out, I think, about a year ago on the subject of natural lighting. And I'm going to take a little bit of inspiration from that as well. Unfortunately, I don't seem to have my copy of the magazine here. I think it's in one of my camera bags, and I couldn't really go hunting for it before the stream. But I'm going to see if I can download it and maybe share it with you all after the stream, because it's quite a good article as well. Hello to, thank you, Ian. I was going to say, don't forget, I didn't mention it enough the other day, I don't think. You can contribute to the Osteopath Fund, as I am calling it today. No, it is the coffee fund. It is for all the staff. But if you want to contribute to that, you can using Super Chat. I think that my widget, oh, my light just got very bright there. I think it was low power. Let me just turn it down a bit. Otherwise it looks a bit scary. There we go. Yeah, I think that the widget that we have with the little ice cream cup, which is on that side, it's something to do with that and a few other factors made the stream very sort of stultified the other day. Is that the right word? It's kind of static looking, and I watched it back afterwards and felt horrible for the fact that there was about a 3 or 4 second delay between what I was saying and what was on the screen. So hopefully that's mostly fixed today. I've just not tried to fiddle with any settings or anything like that. But if you do want to contribute to the osteopath / coffee / I'm not drinking any coffee today, by the way, not with a stiff neck. That's a bad idea. Before someone tells me that I shouldn't, I know already. If you want to contribute to that fund, please do using Super Chat. And if you're not already a subscriber, please do subscribe and hit the little bell icon so that you know when we're next streaming. All right, without any further delay. So the subject of natural lighting, obviously, a lot of people shoot in natural light. They don't use speed lights anyway. But there is a very key point worth knowing when you're shooting any subject in any form of lighting. And so I can't dive into natural lighting without mentioning a few of the metering modes that are worth using for that. So on your Nikon, it's very difficult to do this with a stiff neck, but on your Nikon, you have a number of options of metering mode. Now on the Z cameras, I just got to see that you can see what I can see. On the Z cameras, they're located in the I menu. Now, if you've got a more recent camera, so anything from 2014, D750, that was the first camera that had it, on upwards, they have extra, not the little cameras, not the 3000 and 5000 series, but all of the others have an extra metering mode. This is called highlight priority metering, and that's quite important, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. This light just keeps getting brighter and brighter because I've got it on charge. Let me turn that down. Get myself a beanbag. Yeah, I need a lot of things right now. I need a beanbag, I need a neck strap, all kinds of things. It's unbelievable. I did lots of cleaning and fixing rabbit hutches and stuff last night after I already had a stiff neck, and I think that's what did it. But anyway, it definitely didn't help. So center-weighted metering is the one that, oh, sorry, wrong way, this way, that we most are familiar with. I've turned it off now. It's going great. There we go. So center-weighted metering is that one that you'll see on this side. Now, I've got mine on spot metering, so it's a bit hard for you to see. But center-weighted metering, matrix metering, center-weighted spot metering, and highlight priority are the options on all the current cameras. Most people will have their camera set to matrix metering. That is the one that everybody knows. And essentially what the camera does is it adjusts the exposure for the entire scene. So it's that little square, or rectangle I should say, that has all of the little spaces filled in dark. On Nikon cameras, that's what matrix metering looks like. Wine works, yeah. I don't drink, but maybe I should take it up just for the neck ache. All right, so that's matrix metering. The next one is often used in film cameras, and it's called center-weighted metering. That's the one that looks like the little dot with the brackets around it. And you can actually tell your digital camera how large you want the center-weighted portion to be. So essentially, if you've got a picture of, let's say you're taking a picture of a person against a bright background, matrix metering would meter for the entire scene. Center-weighted metering would meter just for the central portion, and you can tell the camera how much of that center you want it to meter against. The other one that I recommend generally, and whenever I'm doing one-to-one tuitions, I usually recommend this for things like macro photography and portraiture, is spot metering. That's the one we're going to talk about a little bit. Spot metering uses the point, so if you've got an autofocus point, single point set up on your camera, that is the point that the camera is going to use to meter off. So whether your subject is on the far left or the far right or at the top or the bottom or wherever it is, wherever your focus point is, that's where the camera is going to meter off. That is very useful if you are taking pictures of subjects where, particularly if you don't use the center point, if you don't focus and recompose, but you actually move your point around your frame, then spot metering is very handy. Nick says he uses center-weighted metering. To be honest, there's not a huge difference between center weight and spot, except if you are of the let's say the group of photographers that focus and then recompose, then center-weighted metering is fine, depending on how you use your autofocus and auto exposure locks. That's a whole different stream. I think if I start talking about back button focusing and AE lock, then everyone's gonna wonder why we were talking about natural lighting. But spot metering is the one that I'm going to recommend for portraiture. Oh, yay! Thank you, Trevor. Thank you very much. Very conservative clap today. No jerky movements for me. So spot metering, if you are doing, hello Jim, if you're doing portraiture, or in my case I do a lot of macro work, so when I'm doing macro I tend to use spot metering because the subject isn't always in the center of the frame, and I quite often want to move my AF point to wherever I'm wanting it to meter off. So spot metering is quite good for that. The other one, which is Nikon's, I would say understated but incredibly useful metering mode, is the highlight priority metering. Now that is only useful if you shoot in RAW, really. Essentially what it does is it takes all of the highlighted areas of the frame and it exposes for those. Now, just to get a little bit technical on you here, most cameras, digital cameras I should say, it's easier to recover the shadows than it is the highlights. So if you clip your highlights, which means if you overexpose your highlights, you usually can't recover much information in post-processing. This particularly applies if you're shooting JPEG. If you're shooting RAW, you've always got a bit more information to play with. Still, if you clip your highlights, you're not going to be able to recover them completely, even if you're shooting in RAW. If you're shooting in JPEG, what happens is the camera basically chucks away a load of information. So if you are planning to post-process or edit after you've taken your picture, then please do shoot in RAW. It will just give you so much more information to work with. If you're of the take the picture and it has to be perfect first time variety, then you can shoot in JPEG with no problems if you're not going to put it through any processing software. So when you clip your highlights, you lose information regardless of RAW or JPEG, but you will lose information. If you underexpose, you can usually recover more information afterwards when you post-process, which is why highlight priority metering is very useful if you are a RAW shooter and if you're happy to post-process, because you will get more information that way. You will basically not clip your highlights, and you will also be able to recover a lot of information in your shadows. Hopefully everyone is following so far, but essentially highlight priority metering is very useful. As I say, very beneficial in RAW, gives you more information to be able to recover in the shadows, and you've got your highlights that haven't been clipped. And if you're shooting in JPEG, you probably don't want to use highlight priority, but use a different method of metering, because you can still edit your pictures, but you'll lose a lot of information in doing that. So that is matrix, center weighted, spot, and lastly highlight priority. Now, talking about natural lighting, we're usually talking about either shooting near a window or from a room that is very well lit. We're not talking about speed lights. There is no problem with using speed lights. In fact, they have incredible creative possibilities and avenues, and I'm pretty sure that Neil and Rishi, who work at the Nikon school, are doing some they're not doing YouTube live streams, they're doing Instagram lives, which if you're on Instagram, you should go follow Neil. I think it's on his page. But they are brilliant in the instruction of using speed lights, and I think pretty much everything I've learned about speed lights has either come from him or Joe McNally. I mean, it's like I don't tend to use flash very often unless it's for a little bit of fill flash, but I am Andy, I'm just going to read that here we go. Understood that highlight weighted metering was the same as matrix metering, but yeah, the exposure automatically adjusted to ensure the whites are not clipped. Essentially, yes and no. So you can shoot in JPEG and RAW, by the way, if you are using highlight priority metering. But essentially, it is the light portions, anything that is white or lighter than the rest. So you know how we talk about highlights, midtones, and shadows. So it's essentially the highlights or the light portions of the frame, which highlight weighted metering is designed for. Hopefully that makes sense, essentially. So now center weighted is what actually most film cameras used, Andy. Up until sort of we got autofocus film cameras like the F4 and the F5, where we start getting more fancy metering modes in. But yeah, if you've got an analog film camera, then center weighted is what you're going to be stuck with. I did not bring my FM3A up to my office, so I can't show you, but on the back of the FM3A, you do have an auto exposure lock, which is very useful. What essentially you can do, and the same with with digital cameras as well as film cameras, if you've got an auto exposure lock, it means that you can meter. The center weighted metering is chosen, so you can meter, and then you push that little lock button, and even if you recompose slightly, your exposure doesn't change. Obviously that's useful if you've got aperture priority on your camera and you're using it. Thank you to my wonderful assistant. She is also slightly incapacitated today. I think that not being able to leave the house and move around has taken its toll on the Grace Westminster staff. But I must say, we are ploughing on regardless. I figured that there were enough people having problems that we should do the stream, even though I'm a little bit robotic at the moment. So anyway, so she's busy putting links there, and thank you for that. So if you want to follow the Nikon School, you can do that by clicking that link, and then you will find Neil and Rishi's little live streams that they're doing at the moment. They are very busy. They're doing Zoom courses and all kinds of things, and they'll probably talk a little bit about this at some point soon as well. So now we've talked about metering modes. I want to show you some examples of just using natural light for different effects. Now, some people give it fancy names. Nikon certainly did. They call it front lighting and side lighting and back lighting. Those are all valid terms. But essentially all that means is whatever your subject is, it's where the light is coming from. So we're going to take the example of a window, because all of the sample shots that I did over the last couple of days in preparation for the stream were all done using a window as opposed to going outside and using natural lighting. But you can obviously do that if you want to, if you're allowed to go outside, or if you have a garden and you take, or if you're like me and you take your camera when you do your exercise time, then you can also use natural outdoor light for this. So I'm going to just show you, let's switch over the old screen grab. Here we go. Can I make that bigger? Yes, I can. So this was actually, I was doing some shots set up for my book account, my Bookstagram as I call it, which is basically an Instagram account all to do with books and writing and reading. So I was actually just doing a little setup, but I thought this is kind of fun to use as a demonstration. This is my prized Lord of the Rings chess set, and that is an ancient copy of Lord of the Rings there that I inherited from my grandfather. But the shadows that you get, this is what we would call side lighting. So the light comes from the side through this, there's a big window over here. And this was, as you can probably tell, quite late in the day, actually almost golden hour time when the shadows start to get very, very long. So it created quite a dramatic look. There's another one here, which I'm just going to show you. So this again is the light coming from the big window, absolutely no diffusion, no tools whatsoever. It's just harsh lighting. Obviously the book is the thing, the point of the picture, because this is for a book Instagram account. But I also thought it would be quite fun to play with some of the little chess pieces. So here is a little Sam Gamgee, if you know Lord of the Rings. He's a very important character. And this is again side lighting. So this is coming from the side and you get these really, really harsh shadows on the chess set there. Now, I did then diffuse the light a little bit, and I'm going to talk about diffusing the light shortly, but just to show you an example. So that's without any diffusion on a chess piece there. And then where is Treebid? Here we go. This is with diffused light. So as you can see, there is a big difference between having the direct sunlight hitting the object with no diffusion whatsoever, and then this is with basically big diffuser between the light and the subject. And then again, here's some other examples. So when you look at this chess set picture here, it gives you one look, if you like, and then if you look at a diffused example, this is, everything is very evenly lit. The light is quite diffused. Obviously the shadows are very dark. These are all taken straight out of the camera and unedited, so no editing here. When I was actually exposing for the darker chess pieces, obviously even with diffused light, retained all the details in the shadows. This is the tricky thing with metering. You do have to meter for the subject. So on the case of this, I was using matrix metering, but because there was quite a lot of light going in, I did lose a lot of the shadows here. Whereas when later on I switched over to spot metering and he was actually correctly exposed. I could have used matrix metering in that set as well. That wouldn't have made a huge amount of difference which one. So that's just some examples of what you can do. And you can, as a diffuser, literally use a curtain. I mean, you could draw the blinds or the curtain. If you've got a sort of semi-transparent curtain or something like that, it will work quite nicely as a diffuser, just to give you a little bit of a softer light look. So that is the difference between using a diffuser. My mouse is going doolally. Here we go. That is no diffuser versus using a diffuser. It's quite a lot of difference in the amount of light that you get. So that, I'm going to give you some more examples using actual reflectors and lighting tools, but I wanted to show you that just so that you could see. Yeah. Oh, I should put my Bookstagram account in the comments. Thank you. Yeah, if you're interested in all the books that I read, which is a lot, or write, which is also quite a lot, then that's my Bookstagram account. Between Fatini's back and my neck, we're doing so great today. So that's just some examples for you of natural lighting and I'm pretty sure on the chess set pictures, I just pulled across the curtain. I do have a diffuser, but it wasn't quite strong enough for the amount of light that was coming in. So you can just pull across a curtain and that will give you much softer light. I'm now going to show you a tool which I think is very useful. You can obviously create your own reflectors, but natural lighting has a lot to do with how the light is reflected. So here I have in my hand, this is a really inexpensive 6-in-1 reflector. Terry's got 2 of my books. Oh, that's really nice, thank you. That's great. So here we go. So this thing, I'm going to try and take it out without doing myself an injury because it will pop out. Ta-da! So this is a reflector. This is the side that we normally get to see. And as you can probably tell, if I just hold it here, look, the shadows are, I mean, unfortunately the camera screen is a bit cut off, but that already lifts the shadows right there. So a reflector is a very useful thing to have. You can buy them incredibly inexpensively on places like eBay and Amazon. It's not hard to get hold of them at all. You can also use your own tools at home. You can literally, I know someone who was doing their own sort of light reflecting, very well-known photographer who does a lot of product photography. And he was just using tinfoil, literally kitchen tinfoil, and then just stretching it across something so that it would give him some light bounce. And all of these surfaces that I'm going to show you, you can actually recreate at home without having to buy a reflector. But if you have one, then I'm just going to talk about the different uses of them. So there's a few obvious things. This is really useful because it not only does it have multiple sides, it has a silver and a black side, but it also has, and then inside here it's got more sides, but it also has just a plain old diffuser. So I'll try and do this nice and tidy. Let me just see. So this is a normal sort of semi-opaque. It's actually reflecting some of the green screen there. But this is a semi-transparent diffuser. So you could use this kind of thing. You could literally, let me just move my little LED. So this is an LED panel that I'm using. And if I push that light against there, it actually creates a much softer lighting effect. So you can use it that way if you want to. I'm just going to move that away for a second. There's a reason why I've got so many lights up here today. It's for this reason. Sheets of polystyrene are good because they're large and light. Yeah, exactly. Even bigger than, like, this is a 60-centimeter diffuser. It's quite big, and it's fine for the odd sort of portrait shot that I'm doing. But yeah, you can when will Stephen Fry read them so I can buy the audiobooks? That's a really, yeah, I should ask him if he fancies doing them for me, because he did a great job on Harry Potter. It's the right kind of target audience as well. Right, so completely going off the rails here. Kitchen oil sprayed with auto paint works too. Kitchen foil. Is that supposed to say kitchen foil? Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So you can use all kinds of things at home to create your own diffusers. I'm just going to move that again because I'm looking a bit shadowed at the moment. But this one goes inside your reflector. So this is a plain old diffuser. It bends. I'm trying to do it without giving myself a neck strain, but it basically folds down and then it fits into its little bag, so you can slip it inside your camera bag quite easily. Now I want to talk about the other surfaces in this reflector. So the first one that I showed you was the silver one. This is quite an obvious, I say obvious, it's obvious what it does because it lightens up the shadows quite nice and easily. The black side is perhaps less obvious, but essentially if you've got very even lighting all the way around, so let's say you're in a really brightly lit room and you actually want to create dramatic shadows, then with this one you create shadows. I'm not normally holding it this close to my face, but because we're in really close quarters here on the stream, you can see it creates shadows and it actually blocks the light. You can also use it if you've got a large light source and you want to kind of stop the light from spilling over. You can prop one up and kind of flag the light with it to prevent you from getting that light spill. Now, these diffusers, you can buy stands for them. I don't have a stand for mine because I don't really do much in the way of portraiture that doesn't involve being on location somewhere. I'm not usually carrying stands and stuff with me, but you can get them. What I tend to do if I'm doing portrait shots is get the person to hold the reflector for me if it's a headshot, or if I'm doing something where I need to be a bit further away, then I will find a way to prop it up, or I will try and hold it myself. I couldn't do that today because, you know, trying to shoot while having a stiff neck and holding a diffuser would be quite difficult. But anyway, you get the idea. You can do that. Now inside here, oh, look at that. So we've also got a gold diffuser. Now that actually just makes a much warmer light reflection. So my skin tones are a little bit warmer. Obviously on this side, I've just got the direct harsh light from the LED panel there, but on this side, it's reflecting off this gold panel. I'm going to show you some very good examples. Well, reasonably good examples that I took shortly. And then this white one is actually, because this goes over the diffuser, this doesn't diffuse light, this bounces. So this acts as a light bounce. You can hold it in different places when you've got your diffuser inside so that it's nice and rigid. But you can actually use it to bounce in various ways. If you're doing product photography, for example, I've just seen John's comment. I use the wife as a stand, and when she complains, I take her out. Yeah, it's very good. I use my children as stands quite often as well. I'm like, hold this. Little prop stands for me and flash stands. So with this, if you were doing product photography, you can actually, if you want to bounce light off a surface, you can actually have this above your product. It's particularly useful if you don't have high ceilings. If you've got quite low ceilings, the place where I used to live had these hugely high ceilings. They were sort of 2.5 meters, nearly 3 meters high. Down in the countryside, everyone is apparently small. So the ceilings are about 1.5 meters. My husband almost touches, actually he can touch the ceiling. He's 6'2". So something like this is really useful if you are unable to bounce the light and get a nice sort of soft bounce effect. You can instead use this above a product or above a person and then direct your light upwards so that you get this soft bounce. Anyway, yeah, so I had I had the bright yellow Nikon sign behind me, and it was bouncing off all the nice light in there. Also, the light is much warmer in the shop, just because of the ceilings. They're very high and vaulted. You know, I couldn't touch the ceiling without standing on a really high ladder. So having all of that space is really helpful when it comes to dealing with natural light. And all your diffuser or your reflector will do is essentially allow you to direct and angle the light however you want. So I'm now going to show you some examples that I took. Let me just make my screen a little bit bigger so that you can see. Here we go. Wrong one. Okay. This is my oldest munchkin. This is Zach. So with these shots, I use spot metering because I wanted to make sure, I could have used center weighted metering, but essentially I wanted to make sure that the subject of my portrait was the thing that was correctly metered off. So Zach here, this is just with natural light coming through the window, absolutely no diffuser, as you can probably tell. Now, there's an example of using him as a prop. This is with the silver side of the diffuser. And if you can just see the difference there between the dark and the light, I mean, I didn't change the lighting. I didn't move him. He just held the diffuser for me, and it was on the silver side, and it just lifted up that whole side of the face. So now he's got a much more even, it does look like he just got out of bed, which is not entirely inaccurate, but it just gives you an idea of how much a silver diffuser can lighten up the shadows there. Now this next one here is actually with the reflector held underneath his chin, quite a distance away, so it's not right next to his chin. I could have held it closer, and I did for a later shot, but this is with the diffuser down here, so you see it lifted up this portion, but really I would have needed to have held it about here to get perfect balance of light. Now here we go. This is with the gold diffuser, so you can see, if I show you the difference, there's the silver. All right, so it's very neutral light. Here is with the gold. You can actually see that it's gold, although if I didn't tell you that I was using a gold reflector, you might not necessarily know it straight away. You would just think that it was very warm light. Let's go back to that. So that is with the gold, and it's literally held right by his face on that side. I could have again angled it a little bit to fill the little shadows there. I don't know why he looks so tired. He's getting plenty of sleep. I think these are hereditary. They come from me, unfortunately. So now this is with the light the light reflector, the white one, and it doesn't give you as sort of intense an effect as the gold or the silver one. Let's go back to the silver one there. You see that? Versus the white one, which is a much more subtle bounce effect. Now, if I had a flash, what I would probably, or let's say a constant light source that wasn't natural light, but a much brighter light, I would probably end up using the white one, because otherwise the other reflectors would create so much light it would look way overexposed. But still, spot metering on that one. Now the next ones I just moved, so this is all side lighting. As you can see, all of those are done with this big window here. Now we move to the other side of the room, so we're kind of getting front lighting here. So the light is much softer, first of all, because your subject is further away from the light source. So obviously, the closer your subject is to the light source, the harsher the light's going to be. The further away your subject is from the light source, the sort of more diffused the light's going to look anyway. And light is really all about angles and positioning of your subject against them. So this is front lighting with absolutely no diffusion whatsoever. And I figured that I could probably just lift up this side a little bit. So I plonked the gold diffuser there, and just because, oops, keeps doing that, sorry. Just because the colors kind of worked with the guitar in the background, I put the gold diffuser on that side, and you can see that it just lifted up that shadow from that side. There was no movement other than just handing the diffuser over and him holding it on that side. So then you got a much more even light, even though the light is coming from about 3 meters across the room, possibly more, you get a much more even light, and the gold reflects really nicely. And then just a final example of backlighting. This is him at the piano. The light is obviously behind him. The gold reflector is in front of him on the piano, because without it, and I did take a shot, but it was rubbish. So with the gold diffuser, you can actually see his face, whereas without it, it wouldn't have looked so great. He would have had very, very heavy shadows here. So that is just some examples. Now, if that's of interest, I can certainly pop those in the drive folder, but you can probably even do your own examples and you'll see. So are these all with auto white balance? Manual white balance would accentuate various colors more. Actually, no, they are, well, yes and no. So my kind of default setting on the Zs tends to be the auto natural light white balance. There's multiple different white balance modes, and for the harsh lighting ones where I was doing the hobbits, you can actually set your white balance to be natural lighting. That's what I used for that. If I'd used let's say manual white balance, as Nick points out, the colors would be more accentuated. Now I could also fix that in post-processing. As I say, all of those pictures were literally straight off the camera. I took the pictures and then I connected it up to my computer, and wirelessly, and it just transferred the pictures for me. I didn't edit anything, so I could, if I wanted to, go in and tweak those colors as well. So John says silver windscreen sheets, don't use sheep, to keep the heat from heating up your car. That is exactly the kind of reflective surface that you can use. Tinfoil, those windscreen sheet things. You can also get very creative on diffusers. Back when I was just merely playing around with photography, I used to use stockings as diffusers for flash. Obviously, depending on the color of the stockings, you'd get different lighting effects, but that was quite a good way to do it. So the drive folder, my wonderful assistant will put a link to it shortly so that you can get on there. And as I say, if you do want me to upload those pictures, I can. That's no problem. But as I say, you can have a play around with it yourself if you just want to see what using different light sources and reflectors will do. In terms of a black reflector, I would say, to give you dramatic shadow. So if you do have a window light coming in, and you were to put the black, sorry, I need to move now. Here we go. If you were to put that on that side, and you were to have the window light coming in, you would actually end up with a very dramatic, almost scary kind of looking shadow. And the amazing thing about light is, wherever you position it, you do get a very different look on your portraits. It's kind of fascinating how you can make someone look very scary, or you can make them look beautiful or worried or very tired, depending on where you position them and the light. Baxter says generally I use the silver for black and white work. That makes sense. Produces more contrast. White for color portrait work. Yes, exactly. And never use the gold as it changes the skin tone. So that's the kind of fascinating thing with the gold one. It does change the skin tones, makes everything look quite warm. I could talk about white balance and how that you can also change your skin tones based on that, but I think that's probably a stream for another day. I think I have that written down somewhere that I need to talk about that, so I will do that. But anyway, so in terms of using reflective sources, I have in the past used, as I say, stockings, kitchen foil for the black sort of what we call a neutralizer, just black fabric or a dark surface. Anything that will absorb light essentially is really, really good for that. Whereas reflective, you could use anything as your reflector. I had a very interesting conversation with a chap who does some incredible camera photography work. I won't mention his name here just in case just in case he goes, you let out my trade secret. No, but he used to use, to reflect light and bounce it around, he used to use these tiny little mirrors from his daughter's Barbie sets and doll sets, and actually just to pick up little points of light and reflect them onto his subjects that he was taking pictures of. He would have his big key light pointing towards a mirror that would then, or a reflector, sorry, that would point towards the camera or the thing that he was photographing. But then in order to get himself another little bit of light picked up, he would have a mirror positioned, a tiny little Barbie doll mirror positioned so that it would pick up another part of the light and reflect onto the subject. So John here, who does an incredible amount of product photography, almost undoubtedly has other tricks of the trade. He uses other different setups. John Hughes, I know you who use your wife as a stand and polystyrene sheets, probably has a few other sort of homemade do-it-yourself tips and tricks, but those are the ones that I've used. This little thing here that I bought this for, I think, £9, and it was a bargain. Silvered cake bases, yes, work well for macro. I was gonna say, like pots and pans and stuff, you could actually use for close-up subjects. Like if you were trying to do macro or close-up subjects, that would work. Silver plastic and blue tack, I love it. It's so creative. Newspaper works. What does newspaper work to flag the light? Newspaper. You're going to have to explain that one to me, David, because I'm trying to think how you would use newspaper. Maybe as a kind of like a light bounce or something. Or a diffuser, yeah, if it's transparent. There was one other point that I wanted to make. On the chess pictures, those were all taken with the Zed's native 24-70 kit lens. See if I can get it without... I've got so much equipment on my desk, it's unbelievable. This little lens here, you don't have to use a macro lens to get close-up shots at all. In order to get that kind of shallow depth of field look, you can just focus as close as you possibly can with a non-macro lens. Obviously, if you've got a macro lens, then use it by all means, but it's quite useful to know that you can just use something like that to do close-up shots without any problems. David saying it reflects light. Newspaper reflects light. Yes, that's fantastic. I have actually used a big sheet of paper in a certain instance when I needed to reflect light and make sure that it all would just lift some shadows a bit. I mean, it's like anything works. But so if you don't have a fancy reflector and you don't want to buy one just for the sake of trying the experiments out, there's loads of things that you can use. I am going to try and download the issue of Nikon Owner, which I think was issue 62. On the subject of natural light portraiture, and see if I can add that to the drive folder for you, because then you can have a little read of it. The lady that wrote it, it's terrible really, but I've forgotten her name, but she recommends reflectors generally. Obviously she's doing it for a living and she uses reflectors all the time, but she doesn't use any other light source except natural light. So so it's something that you can do at home. By all means, give it a go. I'm thinking of doing a kind of, for our next competition, doing a portraiture themed one, whether it's pet portraiture or people portraiture. I haven't decided yet, but anyway, I'm open to input on that front. Then I'm just going to check that no one asked me a question while I was showing you those pictures, just because. Okay, some people were saying kitchen foil, wax paper, the windscreen sheets. Yeah, that is all very good stuff. Amazing. So you've got a ton of different options. I've also used, believe it or not, Tupperware as a diffuser, not as a reflector, but as a diffuser. When I was doing some food photography in a kitchen and needed an emergency diffuser, having a Tupperware, you know, they've got that kind of almost see-through kind of plastic to them, and stuck a flash in there, dialed it right down, and then use that as a diffuser. So you can do all kinds of things. I wanted to show you also on the, so let me just grab my D850 here. I'm going to show you because it's in a slightly different place on every camera. So if you want to change your metering modes, as I was talking about, on your D850, D700, I think, and a few other those pro bodies, the metering mode button is there. You can also almost always change these settings by going into your shooting menu. So photo shooting menu, I'm going to find it before I show you the camera because the webcam always moves. There you go. So you in your photo shooting menu, you will be able to find your metering mode, and if you want to change the size of, actually on my camera it's in the custom settings menu, it's not in the photo shooting menu. In this 5300 or one of those little cameras, it's in the other one, but on this one it's in the custom settings menu, which is the little pencil icon for anyone that doesn't know or isn't familiar with I'm going to just switch over so I can see what you can see. There we go. So custom setting menu, that one, the one that looks like that, which has A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. So B, which is metering / exposure. In that menu option, you can choose how big you want the center weighted area to be. You can also choose the different types of metering. So on mine, for example, in matrix metering, I've also got the option for face detection matrix metering, which is super handy. Not many cameras have that, but some of them do. That means that the camera will also try and detect a face when it's in matrix metering, which should avoid the situations where you get the person's face is all dark and the rest of the frame is all light. Now, just on the subject of making sure that your subject is correctly exposed and things like that, the metering, if you're looking at the meter on your camera, so if you're shooting in manual or aperture priority or anything other than auto basically, and you're looking at that little meter reading, it's only going to be as helpful and reliable as you're using the correct metering mode. So if you have any questions or get stuck on choosing what metering mode you should be using, fire me a question, but it's all of that stuff that I talked about at the beginning of the stream, essentially. If you're taking a picture of a subject which is fairly evenly lit and you don't have one specific portion that needs to be correctly lit versus the rest, landscape photography is a good example, then you would do matrix metering, also for, let's say, street photography and things like that. If you are taking a picture of a subject that tends to be in the middle, or if you're like Nick and you want to do it old school style and you focus and recompose, which I also do quite a lot of, then center weighted metering is fine, as long as you make sure that when you're setting your metering and when you're autofocusing, which is basically when the meter kicks in, that your subject is in the middle of the frame, and then center weighted metering will work. If you are doing something like macro, or if you tend to move your AF point around using the arrows on the back of the camera, then you want to use spot metering. And then highlight priority, as I said, is for if you are shooting raw and you want to post-process your pictures and you do have heavy highlighted areas that you can't lose. Perfect example, apart from the one that Nikon always talk about, is spotlit subjects. So when people are on stage and they're under a spotlight, you want that to be correctly metered off. The other example that I use it for is actually on the occasions when I do weddings or I do events where people are wearing very bright or white clothes, because with a wedding dress, the worst thing is clipping the highlights and then not being able to recover any of that information. So it's very useful. All right, just to quickly see, there's a bunch of comments popped up. Please do not forget that Super Chat is there if you ever want to contribute to the coffee fund. It should be somewhere in the chat. I can't actually see what you guys can see, but I can see the chat screen there. So Super Chat is in there. If you want to click and contribute, please do. So Blue Serpent. Love that name. Silver reflect will not control spectacular highlights, whereas white stops highlights blowing out. Good. Men with bald heads tend to have a shine. Yes, use the white bounce to control the shine. That is a fantastic piece of advice, particularly if you end up having people where they tend to be quite shiny. Like today I've got this extra light here. I mainly have this extra light here because I wanted to demonstrate different lighting effects. I normally just have one light there and another one there, but I had this extra one. But you could see, now my camera won't focus because I'm not bright enough. It's very annoying. Hello, camera. Focus on my hand. Focus on me. So I look very shiny. I would probably benefit from a white diffuser. So it's a very, very good example. Thank you. Peter Hurley said his first headshot studio was arranged, so he used only natural light. He then went beyond nuts with his Westcott flex, always using constant light to ensure small irises. Yeah, constant light is very helpful if you're doing portraiture as well. Because when you're using speed lights, and I will try and pick this up at some point, but the subject of speed lights is quite big. There's a lot to talk about on the subject of speed lights. You can use speed lights either as a fill for existing light sources, or you can use them completely independently for creative lighting effects, much like Joe McNally does. If you've seen any of his stunning pictures, he uses masses of speed lights, and essentially the only light in that picture is coming from the speed light. So if that's the kind of thing you want to do, that's a whole different ball game. But when it comes to natural lighting, generally we're talking about getting one light source and then reflecting it so that we can completely do it independently of using additional light sources. Andy asked about the Kenko extension tubes. What would you like to know about the Kenko extension tubes, Andy? Because they work and they exist. We have them in stock. But if there was something particularly you wanted to know, let me know. What's my go-to lens? That's a very difficult question, Adrian. So for the portraiture that I just did with my 10-year-old, I was using the 55mm f1.2 AI, which is one of my favorite lenses, manual focus lenses. Generally speaking, most of my stuff is done with the 35 1.4G. For macro, I will tend to use the 60mm 2.8G also. On the Z, the reason why I've kind of been going for this 24-70 here is because it's so small and so light. So when I put that on the Z, I don't really feel like I'm carrying a huge amount of weight around with me. When I shoot film, it tends to be the 55, but you know, it's all horses for courses. The 35 1.4 is probably one of my favorite autofocus lenses. So when it comes to putting it on digital cameras, 35 is the focal length that I kind of see. And a lot of people go for the 50 because it's considered the standard. It's the closest field of view to what the human eye sees. So 50 is what they kind of prefer, which is fair enough. I prefer 35. I just find that 50 is a bit too restricted. But then when I shoot portraiture, I like the 55. Spectacular. Thank you so much, Blue Serpent Media. Why do I not know your name? I feel like I should know who your name is, but thank you so much. Speculite, yes, specularity as opposed to spectacularity or whatever I said. Thank you very much for that contribution to the coffee / osteopath / donut fund that I think we're all in need of. Whiskey fund. If I drank whiskey, then that would be a good use for it. All right, so that is everything that I have to say pretty much, I think, on the subject of natural lighting. There is always more that I could talk about, but I'm also aware of the fact that I need to not lose my voice. I think I've covered all of my things on my notes as well. So by all means, send me questions. I'm always happy to answer them. I have been looking at the comments from the last few streams, and it's mostly just been, you know, comments and encouragement. Thank you so much for all of your emails and your comments. It does mean the world to all of us. I even had Gray today, amateur photographer, featured our little stream on their webpage, and so Gray got a little notification to say that, and he was also thrilled to pieces because it just means that we can stay connected up with everybody while we're not open. I mean, we're open, we're running at an interesting capacity. It's quite difficult to run a shop when the staff are kind of all scattered around working from home, but we are still sending product out once a week, which is about all we can get away with, considering that unfortunately camera equipment is considered non-essential. I beg to differ, but anyway, we are doing what we can, considering that we're all living in different places and not able to see each other. So thank you for all your comments. for all your feedback and your questions. Please do keep them coming. I've got a number of topics in mind, but I'm always happy to completely work off the cuff and answer questions if I can on the fly. Human portraits 135. 1.8? No, it's not a Nikon. Or the 70 to 200 2.8. That is a lovely lens for portraiture. I tend to be a prime person myself. The only zoom that I own is a 24 to 120, and the 24 to 70 for the Z cameras, but the 24 and 20 for f mount. The 24 to 70 2.8 I used to have, and the 70 to 200 I used it a lot for mostly weddings and events, but I'm doing less and less of that now. So I'm actually waiting for the Z versions of all of that to come out. Of the 70 to 200 2.8, which I know everyone's waiting for. If anyone's waiting for new releases, just as an aside, I was told by Nikon that mid-May, possibly going to be pushed back, but mid-May for pretty much every single one of these new releases, including the D6, the 24 to 200 Z lens, the 70 to 200 Z lens, which everyone is waiting for, the 120 to 300 absolute beast f2.8 lens, which is also very exciting. All of those, it looks like they're being pushed back to mid-May at the moment. So if you are waiting for anything or you're on our waiting list, we haven't forgotten about you. We just don't have stock yet. That is everything from me, everybody. So I'm going to find that magazine, pop it in the Drive folder so you can have a read of it over the weekend. If you want to subscribe to Nikon Owner, I do write an article pretty much every issue. Just let me know and I will set you up with a subscription to that. And then separately from that, have a wonderful weekend. I will be streaming, the plan is next Tuesday, but I will, if you're subscribed and you've hit that little alert button, then you will find out if I do a sneaky surprise stream on Monday. Depends on how prepared I am. Then I will do that. Just looking at Thaddeus quickly, 105 135 f2 DC are super for portraits. They are, and I think my thought is that the 120 to 300 f2.8 kind of replaces out a whole ton of lenses that Nikon were going to need to replace because of the new optics. Astrophotography. That'd be quite difficult to do a live stream considering that I stream during the middle of the day, but I will try, Terry. I will try and find some settings that I can hopefully impart on you. Thank you very much, John. I am going to rest up my neck as much as I can. Hopefully I will be in fighting form next week for next week's stream. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and thank you very much once again for joining. Thank you for all your super chat contributions, and I will see you next week. Thanks very much.